Good morning. How are you? My name is Nicholas Frankovic, and once again, I'll be leading this webinar. As you can read in the title, we return to the world of reports and management indicators. Why? Because knowing where we are standing and where we are heading is the only alternative to change the course and achieve the objectives of the leadership. We already know that after COVID, world brought changes. On the one hand, it accelerated technological change processes, and on the other hand, it led to the recess of several key processes. There are fewer sales, less supply, less demand, habits that change roundly, different needs, and along, etc. But one thing hasn't changed. Numbers don't lie. Data is our GPS, and we cannot get lost in decisions based on intuitions because today more than ever, intuition is prone to fail. For that reason, and being redundant, we believe that decisions should be based on data and that data should be reliable, up to date, and easy to understand. What we'll see today are indicators and reports that you should monitor regularly. In Autologica Sky DMS, our DMS, these indicators are easy to obtain, which, according to customers, significantly reduces the time it takes to prepare reports and then analyze them. For each of these indicators, we'll also see the actions that should be considered to improve them. So without further delay, let's look at the indicators and reports we prepared for today. For those who don't know us, Autologica has been part of the automotive industry for more than 25 years through the design and development of the DMS. And in all those years, we harvested unique know-how that we could apply to solve specific situations, in some cases to attack problems, and in many others to prevent situations. That is why it's important to clarify that what we'll see today is the result of being together with customers, investigating, surveying, and solving their needs. Alright, let's use data to achieve concrete goals. Today, they will be for saving money and generating new commercial opportunities. Let's turn numbers into key players in our business strategy. Numbers which, in many cases, are available to us but we don't use them enough. Let's start at the warehouse. There are super organized parts warehouses where it's easy to find parts perfectly labeled, even with recent inventories. But beyond knowing where it is, do we know how it's composed? Ask yourself the following question: which is my percentage of parts with medium and low activity? And then, how much money is locked up there? These questions sometimes make us see adverse situations, which can make us angry or frustrated, but they are the only way to detect points that we should control. Knowing the activity of parts is the answer to that question, because it's the report that will tell us two things. How much money do we have invested in unsold parts, and which parts should we start offering to prevent further loss of value? Having an inventory where the dead stock goes out of hand has a very high opportunity cost. Removes physical space for parts that could have a higher turnover, is a black hole where the value of each item is depreciated, etc. Okay, as I mentioned before, Autologica Sky DMS has this information which facilitates the task of having a first overview of the inventory. And once we have this information at hand, we can act. But beware, it's not just about taking action to fix an existing problem, but rather taking measures to prevent having that stock again in the future. The tactical action is to obtain the list of parts with low activity to be able to carry out, for example, promotions and special offers in order to sell them. This action, on the one hand, will increase part sales and on the other hand, will reduce insurance costs, warehouse rental, etc. Another tactical action, also possible with information provided by the DMS, is to analyze whether the parts with low activity in our warehouse have more activity in other stores. In this way, you can transfer parts to streamline the sale process in each store. As for the strategy, what we always suggest is to adopt habits and strategies to avoid reaching critical situations. In the first place, we always suggest to our customers using reports such as the order suggestion report that indicates through statistical analysis what to purchase to satisfy customers and not overstock. This will translate into fewer but more strategic purchases. This report and these practices are like the backstage, what we don't see of the parts management, but which is the fundamental basis of the department. Now it's time to see what to analyze from what is facing the customer. I ask you an awkward question again. Did you know what the percentage of lost sales is? And did you know the most common reasons for losing sales? This information is also easy to obtain as long as we keep in mind something important. We must have the habit of marking lost sales indicating their reasons. If you don't know the percentage of parts lost sales, it's the same to say that you're losing $1 or 100,000 per month. It's like sailing without a compass or a map. That's why we say the lost sale is not the end of a process, but it's the kick to generate more opportunities. Let's look at the difference in these three scenarios. On the one hand, we have a dealer that does not measure this information because, for example, the dealer considers that data is not relevant. On the other hand, there is another dealer that knows the monthly amount lost in lost sales but does not detect the reasons. And finally, another dealer measures lost sales and the reasons. The first example is subject to chance and intuition. One month the dealer can lose a lot and another month a little, but not through premeditated or thought out actions, simply by chance. This case has another very important counter. The parts manager, the CEO, and the owner don't know they may have a serious problem. Let's go with the second case, slightly better than the first one. Doesn't have the tools to reduce that waste of money either, but at least the dealer is aware that there's a major leak. Worrying without caring is terrible, and this case is the best example. Finally, the last case not only knows how much money the dealer loses per month, but also knows the reasons. And these reasons can be several. For instance, out of stocks, which you can solve by improving parts management and orders. High prices, which can lead you to rethink your commercial strategy. Inadequate customer service, which you can solve by training your sales staff. And delays that cause the customers to cancel an order, which you can also solve by managing purchases. We know that having to register this information is more work for the salesperson, but we are talking about just two more clicks in the system to earn more money. In a recent case, a customer told us that he reduced lost sales by 20% using the DMS features. And if we translate that into money, it's thousands and thousands of dollars we are not leaving on the table. Alright, so to recap what we'll measure in the parts department and how: parts activity, lost sales, and reasons for lost sales. Let's move on to the service department and everything that happens there. When we talk about this area, we always like to mention what is being seen globally with respect to after sales. Bob Atwood, an after-sales management instructor at the NADA Academy, the National Automobile Dealers Association in the USA, stated that one of the things we've learned during the pandemic is that service is the backbone of the dealership. Not the back end, but the backbone. He also said, if we go on lockdown again and you can't sell vehicles, but you can service them, you better be close to 60% absorbed with after sales service or you aren't going to survive. With the drop in sales, also a consequence of the chip crisis, billing from after sales became the protagonist. This, in many cases, encouraged improving department processes, investing money to facilitate jobs, and training technicians to do more work at the same time. The question I propose at this point is, how do you control the profitability, efficiency, and productivity of the department? Right now, do you know if there are any delayed jobs in the workshop? I'll propose three places where to put the focus to have a daily panorama of what happens in the workshop. The first thing to measure is an issue we already addressed on many occasions, and it's the workshop efficiency, that is how many hours are billed out of all the hours worked. Secondly, it's about having tools to detect delays, and we'll see a brief example of a solution we propose to use. Finally, we suggest analyzing the billing cycle for repair orders because this means money. The workshop efficiency indicator allows to know if the operators are efficient within the workshop, that is, whether the time they spend on jobs is profitable for the dealer and therefore generates no losses. How do you calculate this? To measure this, the DMS generates reports which calculate the hours spent on each job. I tell you about the case. A dealer started measuring this and found out of the 400 hours bought from technicians, the dealer was only billing 160 hours. This rate was really alarming and indicated that more than a half of the hours bought from technicians were lost on tasks that were not billed. So the question is, how did the dealer begin to reverse this situation? The dealer implemented a mix of improvements that in the medium and long term improved the indicator, such as more training for technicians to perform better, started preparing the parts to be used on each job before the customer arrived, polished the habit of measuring what was happening in the workshop at the time, and last but not least, trained service advisors to sell more services per customer visit. To facilitate this measurement, we work together with the dealer with a module of Autologica Sky DMS that have a double function. On the one hand, the technicians logged the start and end time for each job on a touch screen in the workshop and even indicated delays and their reasons. In this way, the dealer could have reliable traceability of every hour. On the other hand, the workshop manager was able to see from a computer the real-time status of each job and quickly detect if a technician was delayed or a job was running long to act immediately and solve it. Measure, act. Measure, act. Notice how you begin to generate this habit, which does nothing but resolve. The third thing we suggest reviewing is the invoice cycle because this report lets you detect the internal delays that exist from the moment the work is finished until you generate the invoice for the customer. The invoice cycle control is done by taking the days elapsed from the date of the last work until the date of the first invoice. The report shows an average calculation of the days elapsed until the generation of the invoice. It's very important to have this information on hand because it is money that we are leaving on the table. You should always tend to bill when the work ends because in economies with inflation, the amount customers can pay today is not the same between 1 or 2 months. The report is very clear to analyze. First, we can have a global overview of the delays segmented by ranges of days. And on the other hand, we can see the breakdown of each repair order to make a more detailed analysis. Why are technicians delayed? What can be done to reduce this delay? And should we change the process? All those questions will clear once we see this information. Well, with these indicators and reports, we will be improving the control of the departments that make up the after sales. Are they the only indicators? Of course not, but we decided to cut back to address other areas. In Autologica, in fact, we have hundreds of reports covering key processes in each department, so there's much to discuss. At the end of the webinar, you can ask for more information and we'll tell you more. But for now, let's move on to the sales department. What things will I suggest you analyze in the sales department? We are going to see strategies to manage your sales team and also to analyze all the costs of each sale. When analyzing commercial management, it's necessary to work with a CRM. Sorry, but I still want to focus on the fact that effective management is only achieved using a CRM. Whatever this is, certain indicators should never be left unmeasured. My proposal will go to indicators not so quoted but super important. Let's go with the first one. Conversion rate by origin. This indicator will help us detect which channels are more effective, in which channels we are investing money but do not generate sales, which are the channels we should enhance, etc. Conversion rate between stages. This indicator helps us understand in which stages we drop the most opportunities. For instance, if the conversion rate falls flat between two stages, we will be able to make decisions to avoid that drop. Cost of acquiring a new customer. This indicator is more complicated to calculate, but when we do, we will be able to compare all the costs incurred in the process to convert a customer. Besides these three indicators, of course, there are other management indicators you should monitor daily, such as the generation of opportunities per month, per salesperson, the success rate per month and equipment, among other health indicators. Let's think the commercial team formalizes customers and begins the process of preparing the unit to deliver it. In all these processes, from the simplest to the most complex, there are hours and costs that often go unnoticed. Why some dealers don't control the expenses related to the vehicle sales transaction, knowing that they are key operations? Generally, it's because their DMS does not allow them to obtain this information in a clear and useful way. Not all vehicle sales are profitable, and that is why we must analyze what has been the cost of each transaction. This is done by recording each sale transaction expense and analyzing the reports that support them. Selling a vehicle has many costs. Renting the warehouse, hiring insurance, meetings between the salesperson and the prospect, management expenses, discounts, as well as the marketing actions that generated the interested party. If you don't control this, you can never know the real profit obtained from the sale. So, what can you detect if you register each cost? That a vehicle remains in stock for a long time without being sold and generates high costs for having it in the warehouse and high insurance costs. That you invest a lot of money in marketing to generate leads that don't turn into opportunities. That you give large discounts to customers to not lose the sale, but they affect the profitability of the transaction. Contact costs between salesperson and prospect. Detect the maximum discount margin that can be applied to the customer based on the incentives for registration that OEM grants to the dealer. Alright, for this occasion, let's finish up here with the indicators. We left out many indicators and reports, but don't rule out a second part with more content for you to apply in your dealerships. While you leave me your questions, I remind you that at the end of the webinar, there is a short survey where you can indicate if you want to see a demo of Autologica Sky DMS and learn more about these reports and all the features for dealers. We are currently putting together a schedule of presentations, so I suggest you don't miss the opportunity. Okay, let's go with the questions. Here I see one from Julia. She asks, what will be a normal percentage of dead stock? Okay, thank you for the question. It's generally suggested to have a benchmark that does not exceed 20% of dead stock. Obviously, it's better if you can lower that value even more, but as a goal to achieve, this is more than satisfactory. In fact, those dealers who do this analysis for the first time should not be surprised to notice that they have 40 to 50 and up to 60% of that stock. All right, let's go with another one. Okay, here I see a question from Ramiro that is also related to benchmarks, but in this case he asks what will be the ideal for efficiency. This indicator compares hours invoiced against hours purchased. Therefore, let's set a benchmark of 100%. That is, if you pay 100 hours to technicians, you should at least invoice that same number of hours. When technicians are highly trained, the shops that already have a number of hours and parts to bill customers set by the SPG, the Service Pricing Guide, can be solved in less time, which will exceed that rate. Okay, so as not to delay the webinar and take a lot of your time, I will answer the rest of the questions by email. For now, I want to thank you for attending and remind you that you will see a brief survey so you can tell us your opinion about this talk, and in case you want to see our DMS in action, coordinate a short demonstration. Once again, thanks for attending this webinar. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope to see you next time.